You know you're coming to a restaurant. You know that at the end you're gonna have to pay and tip people for their services. This isn't your first rodeo. So I want you to stop acting like it.
Yo, Pierre, you wanna come out here?
In New York, I merely rock, adding in my socks, running from a and I shoot at
Jumbo everyone, welcome back, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about why tipping is so controversial coming from a server. So if you didn't know, I am a server. I've worked at the Cheesecake Factory for about 1.5 years now. Definitely one of the longest jobs I've had. Already with working in customer service, I understand the aspects that go into working in customer service. This is like my first real like serving job. I'm just going to talk about like a little bit of the stuff that I've seen / witnessed, and also kind of just going into, like, you know me, I'm a history major, so I'm always gonna go into the history of certain things to see why things are the way that they are. Okay, earrings are on. Do I look a little bit more official? I'm just gonna be going over a couple points, such as like the history of tipping, the racial biases, why people don't like tipping, and then where we go from there. Let's get started. So talking about the history of tipping, back then it was actually considered very un-American to tip. It wasn't until post-Civil War when Americans went to like Europe and they saw the customs and they saw the way in which people tip them and tip the waiters and stuff, and then they brought those customs back to the US and started tipping like slaves and low income workers that like didn't necessarily have a wage, but just to like show their appreciation and show how much money they had, they would give tips to them, right? Basically the Europeans didn't like this because, like, think of immigration and everybody coming here after Civil War. A lot of the Europeans didn't like the way that Americans took their customs as tipping and came over here, brought them to the US, and then made it this like big extravagant thing that now it's like, you know, people are obligated to tip in a sense, right? The main reason why employers like this is because they didn't have to necessarily pay people a minimum wage. Because if you're getting tipped, you are forcing the customer to tip your employee instead of you paying your employee a livable wage, which is also why we see the argument a lot today, like just pay them more, but we'll get into that later. Just how we learn in history of how greedy a lot of employers are and that they will do any means possible to make sure that they're making the most amount of money possible while the workers are making the least amount of money. And it's always this kind of like power dynamic of who's making more money, yet you wouldn't even be in the position that you're in without the workers that you have. So obviously you're exploiting your workers. Yet again, reiterating, a lot of employers did not want to have to pay Black people because that was the main people. They were the main people that kind of had the brunt of, you don't get a wage because we're already tipping you. So Black people, especially out of slavery, they were the ones that had to deal a lot with having to get tipped instead of making a livable wage. And if you didn't know, there is like the Pullman company, the Pullman train company, and they are notoriously known for underpaying their workers and forcing them to rely off their tips. And the reason why this is an issue is because nobody can just rely off tips. The thing with having an hourly wage is at least you know you're getting the same amount of money each hour. When it comes to tips, it's very hard to determine whether, you know, that money is stable or not, because one day you could be doing really good and then the next day that you don't make any money that day. So it can vary like a lot. And that's also kind of what I see with me working is like one day I'll make like $300 and then the next day I'll make like $160. And I know that's like still a lot of money considering like, you know, serving wise, but like with me only working 3 days a week and being in school full time, trying to do content creation, it's just like not enough. It's not enough. Obviously, I'm grateful for the way that I budget my money. A lot of people aren't smart in the way in which they budget their money, which leads them to having financial issues. So that's also like kind of why, like, when it comes to tipping, a lot of Black people are the ones who suffer at the hands of it because of the racial biases that come along with it and the history that comes along with it. Even till this day, Black women are still the ones who suffer the most when it comes to tipping and the racial biases in tipping, is because like back then, a lot of the workers who were getting tipped were women. And so a lot of other positions that like were male dominated, they still got a higher hourly page, but like there were still some instances of them being able to get tipped. But with Black women, with most of them being in like the customer service industry or the restaurant industry, you know, the only two industries that will really allow you to work, one, they weren't making a wage, and two, they literally had to do whatever was possible in order to make a tip, which also leads to a lot of sexual harassment going on within restaurant industries towards Black women and even just women in general. Because when you're not making an hourly wage and you're relying all off of your tips, you have to do a lot of things that you wouldn't want to do, such as like play along with the customer just because they are in charge of making sure if you can pay your bills or not. And that's what I think is really unfair. So with this whole, you know, system going on, because of the minimum wage already being set, because of the new deal, there was a sub minimum wage that was only applied to like servers and tipped workers. At least in the state of Minnesota, the minimum wage is $10.53, I think now. And luckily I live in the state of Minnesota because out of 43 states, 43 of them are the ones that have that $2.13 like sub minimum wage if you're a tipped worker. Luckily with me living in Minnesota, I am able to get the full $10 an hour plus my tips. So even though like my paychecks are still like $200, $300, it's still nice because I still have that extra $200 to $300. Even though it's every 2 weeks, it's still nice knowing that I'm not getting a $10 paycheck because all of it's being taxed by the money that I'm getting. So talking about the racial biases that go on within tipping and just the industry itself, it says that Black women make $5 to $8 less an hour than their white counterparts. And just to me, like, that just seems ridiculous because it's also just like, I don't know, being a Black woman and being a server, it's kind of like you really have to kind of eye and watch the way in which you interact with certain customers, just because it's like some of them love complaining and then they want to see how you're gonna react to them complaining. You're a literal adult child and I don't have time to deal with this right now, but because I need your money to pay my bills, I'm obviously gonna have to tend to you. Like I said earlier, even though Black women get $5 to $8 less an hour, that's even still with performing at perfect service. It's just because of the racial biases that people have when it comes to going to restaurants, when it comes to being served by a Black person. There's also even racial biases on the servers end when it comes to like taking a table or, you know, serving a certain demographic of people. And I'm gonna sound extremely racist when I say this, but I don't think it sounds racist, but just because I'm African and it's kind of like another African group talking about, it's like me, Liberian, talking about Nigerian people. Certain demographics that come into at least my job, the Cheesecake Factory, one of the big ones would be Somalians. A lot of the time, Somalian people will run up a $300 tab and not tip you, or tip you $5. I think that can just be one of the racial biases that a lot of servers create within themselves, because obviously for me, that's not for me saying, oh, I treat Somalian people differently. No, I treat every single table exactly the same, niceness, attentiveness, all that stuff, because one thing you're not gonna say, regardless of if you tip me or not, is that I wasn't an attentive server and I didn't give you everything that you need, because I'm on my table's ass. I even tell them, I'm like, I'm an annoying server. Like, I will check up on you multiple times because I never know what you could need, even if it's the smallest thing. Even when it comes to my Somalian tables and they are running me a fucking round, they still don't tip on top of that. I just know that somebody else will make it up to me later in the night. But that, who's to say that that's all Somalian people? And that's what I'm saying. And that's also where this like racial bias comes from when it comes to taking tables of color, because they don't tip all the time. Okay, when I say certain tables of color, I'm not saying all people of color. Okay, I'm saying certain groups that will come in, literally run your ass around, be rude to you, and then not tip you. Like, do you have any restaurant experience? This is an all servers thing. We can tell if you've ever worked in customer service or not. It's by the way that you treat us, and it's also by the way that you tip us. Because a lot of the times, regardless of if my table was mean to me or not, if they still tip me 20%, I know that they worked in customer service, because I'm like, you understand that this is what I live off of. I live off of the money that you give me. So what good does it take if I have to take an hour out of my time to serve you and you run up a $200 tab and you can't give me the $40 or $36 that come with it? I've also seen a lot of stuff saying that the reason why a lot of people of color, more specifically Black people, don't know how to tip is because of the way that they grew up. A lot of Black people don't grow up going to restaurants, sit down restaurants more specifically, and really being able to see their parents tipping the servers, thanking the servers for, you know, everything that they've done. It has not been shown to them, okay, versus their white counterparts. So obviously a lot of the times it's a lot more known within the white community, like to tip and all that stuff. But if you're a Black person within the Black community, it's not really known about tipping unless you have worked in customer service yourself, and then you have to explain to everybody like, yeah, I make decent money, but that money also comes off the hands of waiting on everybody else, making sure that everybody has what they need, making sure that they're always happy, because there will be someone in my shift who will find anything to complain about. That's on y'all. I don't got shit to do with that. Tipping also encourages worker exploitation, just because it makes the employers be able to not pay their employees decent amount of money in order to survive, and then they have to rely off of the customers to be able to pay them. Personally, me, I'm just glad that at Cheesecake Factory we don't pool our tips, because like there are certain bills that are a lot of fucking money, and if I did all the work, why would I share my $60 tip? Does that make sense? So it's also kind of just like, it's a huge cycle that goes like around and around and around, and I really feel like if you don't work in the customer service industry, like you can't really understand like how it works. It's stressful, to say the least. So yeah, that argument of like employers should be paying their workers more, we know that's not gonna happen, okay? So how about you guys stop coming out to eat and spending large amounts of money and not tipping your waitress, because it's very unattractive. Now we're gonna talk about why everybody hates tipping so much. I think tipping really became more well known when COVID came, and a lot of people were doing DoorDash and Grubhub and, you know, all those services where you have to tip people in order for them to make a wage off of it. This is just my opinion, because I've had so many jobs, because I've done DoorDash, all these customer service jobs where like I have to tend to other people or get what other people need. You should not be ordering off that app in the first place if you cannot pay the tip. That's just my opinion. I've seen so many things on like Instagram and TikTok of videos of people literally being like, well, I'm taking your food back because you didn't tip me. And there was one specific case that comes to my mind, is this woman who ordered over $400 worth of groceries, and the lady brought it in like a timely manner, you know, dropped all that off, but then she saw the woman didn't tip. Bitch, I would take all the fucking groceries back to the store too, because you're not gonna fucking sit here, spend $400 and expect me, someone who's already having to go fucking grocery shopping for you, pack all the shit, put it in my car, use my gas to drive to your house to then drop it off and see that you couldn't even fucking tip me? So why are you ordering off the app in the first place? Like, that sense of entitlement is like, if you are already going on that app and spending the extra money on the fees, you have the extra money to tip your driver, because that is their job. The app is not paying them. And yet again, we're in this argument of, well, the app should be paying them more. Well, you shouldn't be on the app in the first place if you can't afford to help someone out. If it's really that hard, you should go grocery shopping for yourself. Like, why are you so fucking lazy that you're gonna get mad at someone who's literally doing the job for you and you don't want to tip them for their services? You think a measly little $20 is gonna help them after they just spent 2 hours in a grocery store grocery shopping for you? Like, this is what I'm talking about. It's like this, the only people that are complaining about tipping are people who have never worked in customer service before. For me personally, like, I don't want to hear people complaining about tips when there are people who are literally making like $15 to $20 an hour who still get tips, okay? At the Cheesecake Factory, there are certain positions that you can work where you can make like $18 to $20 an hour and still make tips on top of that. I'm not talking about y'all. I'm talking about motherfuckers who solely have to rely on their tips for a living. My $10 an hour doesn't do shit. Yes, it helps me pay my light bill, but that doesn't help me when it comes to like paying my rent. I do not rely on my fucking 2-week paycheck to help me pay rent. No, I have to budget my tips accordingly in order to make sure that I have enough money for rent and my other bills. So that's where it's just like, it's frustrating, where it's like, I don't want to hear about the people who are baristas and, you know, other positions where it's like, you guys are still making a decent hourly and you still get tipped on top of that. I'm talking about the motherfuckers who are making $2 an hour in 43 different states, and they're the ones who have to rely on their tips. They're the ones who have to probably pick up a second job, a second hourly job, because their tip job isn't making them enough money. That's who I'm talking about. Also, in just like the simplest terms possible, if states have been able to get away with paying their workers $2.13 as a sub minimum wage, what makes you think all of a sudden we're just gonna have this big massive change where everybody's getting paid a livable wage? We live in fucking America. How long have we been struggling for this shit for? How many protests? How many, all these different things to try to raise the minimum wage? Has any of that helped? Barely. I'm so sick of hearing the argument of like expecting these employers to all of a sudden change their minds and like they're just gonna start paying people more money. Baby girl, come on now. Come on. Unless everybody's doing it at a mass time, we all boycott every single fucking restaurant, which we know isn't gonna happen, then nothing's gonna change. So I don't want to hear it. Also, I'm just gonna explain to y'all real quick how tip out at least Cheesecake Factory is, okay? Say I sell $1,000 worth of food, right? I have to pay the bussers 3%, the food runners 1%, and the bartenders 1%. So my sales are 1%. That means I have to pay the bussers $30 and the bartender and the food runner each $10. That's $50 of my tip just from tip out. Imagine if I didn't get tipped on over 2 tickets. Okay, 2 tickets of not getting tipped on $200 worth. That's $80 I just missed out on. So not only am I having to come out of my pocket to pay people, but I'm leaving with less than what I know I deserve because people want to come out and run up tabs and not tip. It's just really frustrating that you guys have the money for the bill, but you don't have the extra little $10, $20, $30 for the fucking tip. Stop coming out to eat if you don't have the money. You guys come out to eat for an experience, right? To sit down, to have someone wait on you, to be able to chit chat with your friends. Cool. If you don't want to tip, take your shit to go. Eat your shit in the car. Eat it at home if you don't want to tip that bad. But stop coming into the restaurant, making me waste an hour on you just for you to not tip me in the end. You know you're coming to a restaurant. You know that at the end you're gonna have to pay and tip people for their services. This isn't your first rodeo, so I want you to stop acting like it. It's really frustrating, especially if the service was good. How are you not gonna tip when the service is good? And that's also, like I said earlier, how I can tell that some of y'all have never worked in customer service in your life. To know that people literally rely off of the tips that you give them, it's actually disrespectful to come in, waste an hour and a half of their time, and then get up and not tip. What are we doing? If you are on DoorDash, Grubhub, fucking Uber Eats, all those apps where it requires someone to pick up your food and bring it to your house, stop ordering food if you cannot afford to tip that driver. If you don't have a car to go get it, nobody told you to order off DoorDash. Cook some food at home. If you have an abusive situation at home, I get it. I get ordering off of DoorDash. I get it. You know, you don't have any food at home. Who's to say the person that's bringing your food isn't fucking struggling as well, isn't in an abusive situation as well, and DoorDash is their only means of getting money? How about we just start tipping people? Because we already know this economy is shit. We already know that the government is not going to pay us more. So how about we help each other out instead of keep being selfish and fucking complaining about tipping? Then don't go out and get any services if you don't want to fucking tip. So what can we do now? Y'all can either get the fuck up, start protesting, or shut the fuck up about tipping and help people out. You already know that you're getting more money hourly. I'm not. So if you come out to a restaurant for an experience, help a bitch out. Don't sit there and waste my time if you're not gonna help me out. This is my job. This is what I have to do every single day. Y'all probably are just sitting there with your nice little office job and you don't have to interact with people like that. Regardless, we live in a country where employers don't pay their workers. We, like, literally there's nothing we can do about it because there's people at the top who literally control all of the money. So it's just like, at this point, tipping is what we're gonna have to do. It's been a custom since like the fucking 1800s. It's gonna stay a custom probably until it's never gonna be abolished. There are employers who don't want to pay their workers. Simple as that. If you're not gonna go out and do the service yourself, like go get your own pizza, go get your own food, go get your own groceries, then you shouldn't be on the app if you're not gonna fucking tip. Like I said earlier, these apps come with all these extra hidden fees and all this other stuff, and you're ending up paying $20 more than if you would have gotten it by your damn self. Stop being a lazy fuck. Maybe get up and go get your own shit. Especially, I have an experience. Someone I used to live with, aka my cousin, would order DoorDash all the fucking time like we don't live in the city and shit's 5 minutes away. Those are the people that I'm talking about. You have a car, you have money, go and get the shit yourself. Why are you paying someone else to do it? The last thing I have to say is, if you don't work in the restaurant industry or customer service industry at all where you have to rely on your tips, I don't want to hear you complaining about having to tip people. If you have never worked in customer service in your life, let alone the restaurant industry, you do not have a place to complain. Thank you. I know this is kind of a long video, rant, a little ramble. Just me as a server, I feel like I need to come on here and express my opinion because you motherfuckers be just taking shit for granted a little bit too often, and it's a little frustrating. It's a little frustrating how y'all just expect everybody to do everything for you but not tip them for their work. And the reason why I'm talking about this too is just because I'm a black woman. Black women suffer the hardest when it comes to tipping. Obviously, I'm gonna talk about it. I've already said multiple times, I know deep down in my heart that Cheesecake Factory will be my last job before I'm content creating full-time, ASL interpreter, all that stuff. That's all I gotta say for now. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I'll see y'all in my next one. Bye, y'all.